Blood trickled down 11-year-old Isaiah Washington's leg as first-class flight attendant Pamela Brooks stood over him, silver fork still clutched in her trembling hand. The luxury cabin of Transnational Airways Flight 2187 falls silent. Passengers frozen in shock. A tall, distinguished black man rises from his seat in the last row. Before we dive into this shocking story, tell me where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever experienced or witnessed discrimination while traveling. Let me know in the comments if you've ever been underestimated because of your appearance. Now let's get into this unbelievable true story that changed an entire airline industry. Isaiah Washington fidgeted in his plush leather seat, unable to contain his excitement as he ran his small hands over the smooth armrests. At 11 years old, this was his first time flying first class, and the luxury cabin of Transnational Airways Flight 2187 from Atlanta to Los Angeles felt like a spaceship compared to the cramped economy section he was used to. "Stop touching everything, Isaiah," his mother, Gabriella Washington, whispered. Though she smiled, there was tension around her eyes. "Just sit still, okay?" As a single mother and high school science teacher, Gabriella couldn't typically afford first-class tickets. Today was special, though. Isaiah had won the National Junior Science Competition with his project on renewable energy, earning not only the grand prize but also an invitation to present at the prestigious Youth Innovation Summit in Los Angeles. The first-class tickets were her splurge, a reward for his remarkable achievement. "But Mom, look at all these buttons," Isaiah whispered back, pointing to the seat controls. "And we get real headphones, not those plastic ones that hurt your ears." Gabriella nodded, but her attention was divided. She couldn't help noticing the sideways glances from other passengers as they settled into their seats. An elderly white couple across the aisle had given them a particularly long look before exchanging whispers behind cupped hands. A businessman in an expensive suit had double-checked his ticket when he saw them, as if certain there must be some mistake. "Just remember what we talked about," Gabriella said quietly. "Best behavior, okay? We're representing." Isaiah nodded solemnly, understanding the unspoken weight of his mother's words. At his predominantly white private school, which he attended on scholarship, he was used to being one of the few black students. His mother had taught him early about the unfair reality that he would be judged more harshly than his white peers. "Welcome aboard Transnational Airways Flight 2187 to Los Angeles," came the professional voice of a flight attendant over the intercom. The lead flight attendant, Pamela Brooks, appeared at the front of the first-class cabin. With her perfectly coiffed blonde hair, crisp navy uniform, and practiced smile, she looked like she'd stepped straight out of a commercial. A 20-year veteran of the airline, Pamela took pride in her service, especially in first class. She began making her way through the cabin, greeting passengers with practiced warmth. "Good afternoon, Dr. Reynolds, lovely to have you with us again," she said to the elderly man across the aisle. "And Mrs. Reynolds, that brooch is absolutely stunning." She moved methodically down the aisle, making personal comments to almost every passenger. When she reached Isaiah and Gabriella, however, her smile tightened. "Seats 3A and 3B, she said flatly, without making eye contact. She reached over to adjust Isaiah's tray table, though it was already properly stowed. "Please ensure all electronic devices are in airplane mode for takeoff." Before Gabriella could respond, Pamela had moved on to the passenger behind them, her voice immediately warming again. "Mr. Davidson. I thought that was you. How was your conference in Atlanta?" Gabriella felt her shoulders tense but chose to say nothing. She'd experienced this kind of treatment before, the subtle differences, the microaggressions. Instead, she turned to Isaiah and helped him select a movie from the entertainment system. As boarding neared completion, a final passenger hurried aboard. Tall, with close-cropped salt and pepper hair and wearing an impeccably tailored charcoal suit, the black man carried only a sleek leather portfolio. Though he was dressed as well as or better than anyone in the cabin, Pamela's greeting to him was as perfunctory as the one she had given Isaiah and Gabriella. The man took his seat in the last row of first class, pulled out some papers, and began reviewing them. That's weird, Isaiah whispered. What's weird? Gabriella asked. That man has the transnational pin on his lapel. Like the one in the pictures on their website. Gabriella glanced back discreetly but couldn't make out such a small detail from their seats. Don't stare, Isaiah, she murmured. As the plane prepared for takeoff, a younger flight attendant named Marcus Reed came through checking seat belts. Unlike Pamela, his smile was genuine when he reached them. First time in first class, he asked Isaiah kindly. Isaiah nodded enthusiastically. I won a science competition. We're going to Los Angeles so I can present my solar energy project at the Youth Innovation Summit. That's impressive, Marcus said, giving a low whistle of appreciation. A future scientist, huh? Well, you're going to love the service up here. If you need anything at all, just press this button. He pointed to the call button on Isaiah's armrest. After Marcus moved on, Isaiah turned to his mother, his eyes bright with excitement. Mom, do you think we'll have time to visit the California Science Center? They have the Space Shuttle Endeavour there. Gabriella smiled, relaxing slightly. We might. We'll have a free day before your presentation. As the plane taxied and eventually lifted into the air, Isaiah pressed his face against the window, watching Atlanta shrink beneath them. His mind was already racing ahead to Los Angeles, to the Science Museum, to the stage where he would present his project. In his excitement, he didn't notice Pamela Brooks watching him from the galley, her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval, as if his very presence in first class was a personal affront. Once the plane reached cruising altitude and the seatbelt sign dinged off, the first-class cabin sprang into action. Pamela and Marcus began preparing for the pre-meal drink service, with Pamela taking the lead while giving Marcus instructions in hushed tones. Pamela moved methodically through the cabin with her cart, offering warm towels and taking drink orders with practiced efficiency. She served the elderly couple across from the Washingtons first, preparing their gin and tonics with a flourish. Would you care for some warm nuts with your drinks? She asked them, presenting a small porcelain dish. The service continued down the aisle, with Pamela maintaining pleasant conversation with each passenger. When she finally reached Isaiah and Gabriella's row, her smile had vanished. Drinks? She asked curtly. Could I have apple juice, please? Isaiah asked politely, remembering his manners. I'll have water with lemon, thank you, Gabriella added. Pamela nodded without a word and continued to the next row without serving them. Gabriella frowned but decided against saying anything, not wanting to create a scene. Perhaps there was a logical explanation. 10 minutes later, all the passengers around them were sipping their drinks, but Isaiah and Gabriella's tray tables remained empty. Isaiah looked at his mother questioningly. I'm sure she's just busy, Gabriella whispered, though her expression betrayed her doubt. After another 5 minutes, Gabriella pressed the call button. Marcus responded, approaching with a warm smile. How can I help you? I'm sorry, but we ordered drinks earlier and haven't received them yet, Gabriella explained quietly. Marcus's eyebrows furrowed in confusion. I'm very sorry about that. Let me take care of it right away. He disappeared to the galley, where a tense, whispered exchange with Pamela ensued, just out of earshot of the passengers. Moments later, he returned with apple juice for Isaiah and water with lemon for Gabriella. I apologize for the delay, he said, genuinely contrite. Please let me know if you need anything else. Isaiah took a big gulp of his juice, then set the glass on his tray table. As the plane hit a small patch of turbulence, the glass wobbled. Despite his attempt to steady it, some juice sloshed over the rim, splashing onto the tray table and a few drops landing on his pants. Oh, no! Isaiah exclaimed, grabbing for the cocktail napkin. Before he could clean up the small spill, Pamela appeared, looming over him with a severe expression. This is why we ask passengers to be careful with their beverages, she said loudly, her voice carrying across the cabin. Now look at the mess you've made. Her tone was so harsh that several nearby passengers turned to look. Isaiah shrunk in his seat, his face burning with embarrassment. "It was just an accident," Gabriella said firmly. "The plane hit turbulence." Pamela ignored her, dramatically pulling several napkins from her apron and tossing them onto the tray table. "This will need to be thoroughly cleaned. The leather can stain." As she made a show of wiping up the small spill, Isaiah whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom." "You have nothing to be sorry for," Gabriella assured him, though she kept her voice low. Just then, across the aisle, the white businessman knocked over his entire scotch, the amber liquid spreading across his tray table and dripping onto the floor. Pamela's demeanor transformed instantly. She rushed to his side with a warm, understanding smile. "Oh, these things happen, Mr. Davidson," she cooed, efficiently cleaning up the much larger spill. "Turbulence can catch anyone off guard. Would you like another scotch?" "On the house, of course." The contrast was so stark that even some of the other passengers exchanged uncomfortable glances. From the back of the first-class cabin, the distinguished black man in the charcoal suit observed the scene with a neutral expression, making a brief note on his tablet. Marcus, who had witnessed the entire exchange, approached the Washingtons with extra napkins and a fresh apple juice for Isaiah. "Here you go, buddy," he said kindly. "No harm done." As he cleaned up the remaining moisture, he leaned in slightly. "I'm sorry about that," he said, his voice barely audible. "Some people just..." He trailed off, glancing toward Pamela, then gave them a sympathetic smile before moving on. Gabriella reached for Isaiah's hand and squeezed it. She could feel her son's body tense beside her, recognizing the familiar way he withdrew into himself when faced with unfair treatment. At school, at the mall, even at the science competition, it happened often enough that he developed this coping mechanism, becoming quieter, smaller, trying to be invisible. "Remember who you are," she whispered to him. "Remember what matters." Isaiah nodded, but kept his eyes down, focusing intently on the movie playing on his screen, though it was clear he wasn't really watching it. As the flight progressed toward the meal service, the atmosphere in the first-class cabin grew increasingly tense. Gabriella noticed several passengers watching Pamela's interactions with them, some with disapproval, others with uncomfortable indifference. She wondered how many would speak up if things escalated further. From the last row, the mysterious man continued to observe, his eyes missing nothing. "We'll be beginning our lunch service shortly," Pamela announced to the first-class cabin, her practiced smile firmly in place. "For those of you who pre-ordered special meals, we'll be serving those first." Isaiah perked up slightly. Before the flight, Gabriella had ordered him the children's meal as a treat, something he rarely got to experience since he declared himself too grown for kids' meals at restaurants. Pamela and Marcus began distributing meals throughout the cabin. The elderly couple received their low-sodium options, while the businessman was served his pre-ordered vegetarian meal. As the service continued, Isaiah watched eagerly for his special meal, but Pamela passed their row without acknowledgement. When all other passengers had been served, Isaiah and Gabriella's tray tables remained empty. Gabriella caught Marcus's eye as he passed, and he frowned, heading immediately to the galley. A few moments later, he emerged with a concerned expression, approaching their seats. "I'm very sorry, but it appears your pre-ordered meals weren't loaded onto the flight," he explained quietly. "I'm checking to see what alternative options we can offer you." Gabriella's eyebrows rose. "That's strange. I received confirmation when I ordered them online." "Let me look into this further," Marcus promised, returning to the galley. Through the gap in the curtain, Gabriella could see Marcus speaking animatedly to Pamela, who seemed to be responding dismissively. The conversation grew more heated, though they kept their voices low. Finally, Marcus returned with Pamela following reluctantly behind him. "There seems to have been a misunderstanding," Pamela said stiffly. "We've located 2 regular meals we can serve you." "But what about my special meal?" Isaiah asked, his disappointment evident. "Mom ordered it 3 days ago." "As I said, there's been a misunderstanding," Pamela repeated, her tone making it clear the matter was closed. Marcus gave them an apologetic look as he helped serve their meals, standard first-class fare that, while excellent, wasn't the special treat Isaiah had been looking forward to. As they began eating, Isaiah looked at his plate of grilled chicken and vegetables, then glanced across the aisle where a white child about his age was enjoying a fun-shaped children's meal complete with an ice cream sundae. Isaiah took a bite of his chicken, then reached for the salt. "Mom, could I have some ketchup for the potatoes?" he asked quietly. Gabriella nodded and pressed the call button. Pamela appeared, her expression making it clear she found the summons an imposition. "Yes?" she asked curtly. "Could we have some ketchup for my son's potatoes, please?" Gabriella requested politely. "I'm afraid we're out of ketchup," Pamela responded immediately. Isaiah's brow furrowed in confusion. "But that boy has ketchup," he said, pointing across the aisle where the white child was happily dipping his fries into a small container of ketchup. Pamela's face tightened. "As I said, we're out of ketchup." Isaiah, ever observant, noticed the corner of a red packet peeking out from Pamela's apron pocket. With innocent directness, he pointed and said, "There's ketchup in your pocket." The cabin seemed to go silent as Pamela's face flushed red, her eyes narrowing at Isaiah. "Are you calling me a liar?" she hissed, leaning closer to him. "No, ma'am," Isaiah replied, shrinking back in his seat. "I just saw." "I've had enough of your attitude," Pamela snapped. "First the spilled juice, now this disrespect." Gabriella intervened, her voice calm but firm. "My son wasn't being disrespectful. He simply pointed out something he saw." Pamela ignored her, focusing her anger on Isaiah. "Young man, in my 20 years as a flight attendant, I've never encountered such entitled behavior. You need to learn some manners." As she spoke, she aggressively reached across Isaiah to place a fork beside his plate. In a motion too deliberate to be accidental, she drove the tines of the silver fork into his thigh. Isaiah gasped in pain, jerking backward. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Gabriella looked down and saw blood beginning to seep through her son's pants where the fork had punctured his skin. "You stabbed my son," she exclaimed, her voice breaking the stunned silence of the cabin. Blood trickled down 11-year-old Isaiah Washington's leg as first-class flight attendant Pamela Brooks stood over him, silver fork still clutched in her trembling hand. The luxury cabin of Transnational Airways Flight 2187 fell silent. Passengers frozen in shock. A tall, distinguished black man rose from his seat in the last row. Gabriella Washington's eyes flashed with a mother's fury as she stood up, positioning herself between Pamela and her injured son. "Get away from him," she growled, her voice low and dangerous. "It was an accident," Pamela stammered, her face drained of color as she stared at the bloodstain spreading on Isaiah's pants. The fork tumbled from her trembling fingers, clattering onto the floor. "I didn't mean to." "Accident?" Gabriella cut her off, voice rising. "You deliberately stabbed an 11-year-old child with a fork." Marcus rushed over, first aid kit in hand, his face a mask of horror. "What happened?" he demanded, then saw the blood. "Oh my God, Isaiah, are you okay?" Isaiah sat frozen in shock, staring down at his leg. The pain hadn't fully registered yet, his mind still processing what had happened. His lower lip trembled as he fought back tears. "I need to see his injury," Marcus said, kneeling beside Isaiah's seat. Gabriella nodded, gently helping Isaiah roll up his pant leg to reveal 4 small puncture wounds on his thigh. Though not deep, they were bleeding steadily, tiny crimson rivulets running down his skin. "This is assault," Gabriella said, pulling out her phone to document the injury. "This is a hate crime against a child." Pamela backed away, bumping into another passenger seat. "You don't understand," she pleaded, looking around wildly. "He was being disrespectful. I didn't mean to hurt him." The plane hit turbulence. "The seatbelt sign isn't even on," a passenger pointed out. "There's no turbulence." The cabin had erupted into a buzz of shocked conversations and accusations. Some passengers were recording the scene on their phones, while others looked away uncomfortably. "She should be fired immediately," one woman declared loudly. "Let's not jump to conclusions," countered an older white man from across the aisle. "I'm sure there's more to this story. The boy must have provoked her somehow." "Provoked her?" another passenger scoffed. "By asking for ketchup. I saw the whole thing." As the arguments escalated, the man in the charcoal suit from the back row made his way forward. His presence was commanding, each deliberate step exuding authority. The cabin gradually fell silent as he approached. Meanwhile, Marcus was cleaning Isaiah's wounds with antiseptic wipes from the first aid kit. "This will sting a little," he warned gently. Isaiah winced but remained brave, a single tear escaping despite his best efforts. "The captain has been informed," Marcus told Gabriella. "He's considering an emergency landing." Gabriella nodded, still photographing the injury and the bloodied fork on the floor. When Pamela reached toward her, apparently trying to block her from taking photos, Gabriella's eyes flashed. "Touch me or my phone, and it will be the second biggest mistake you've made today." Pamela withdrew her hand, looking desperately around the cabin for support. Finding none, she turned to Marcus. "You know me, Marcus. You know I would never intentionally harm a child." Before Marcus could respond, the distinguished man in the charcoal suit stepped forward. "I believe I've seen enough," he said, his deep voice commanding immediate attention. He turned to Pamela. "Ms. Brooks, isn't it? Your employee badge says you've been with Transnational Airways for 20 years. Pamela nodded, straightening slightly. "Yes, sir. 20 years of exemplary service." "Exemplary?" the man repeated, raising an eyebrow. "I've been on this flight since Atlanta, and what I've witnessed from you today has been anything but exemplary." Confusion crossed Pamela's face as she tried to place him. "I'm sorry, sir, are you with the airline?" A thin smile appeared on the man's face as he reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew an identification card. "Jeremiah Washington, Chief Executive Officer, Transnational Airways." He turned to Gabriella and Isaiah, his formal demeanor softening. And more relevantly at this moment, Isaiah's father. A collective gasp swept through the cabin. Pamela's face went from pale to ashen. "Father," she stammered, her eyes darting between Jeremiah and Isaiah. What do you think about Pamela's reaction when she realized who Isaiah's father was? Comment number 1 if you think her behavior would have changed had she known from the beginning. Comment number 2 if you believe she would have treated Isaiah the same way regardless of who his father was. Hit that like button if you've ever witnessed someone's attitude completely change when they discovered who they were really dealing with. Subscribe to our channel for more shocking true stories of justice and comeuppance. What do you think will happen next? Will Jeremiah fire Pamela on the spot? Will the plane make an emergency landing? How will this incident affect Isaiah moving forward? Stay tuned to find out how this shocking confrontation unfolds. "Yes, Father," Jeremiah confirmed, his voice steady but with an undercurrent of controlled anger. He turned to Isaiah, his expression softening with concern. "Are you okay, son?" Isaiah nodded bravely, though his leg was throbbing. "I'm fine, Dad." The bewildered passengers watched this exchange with growing understanding. The elegant man in the back row wasn't just any passenger, he was Jeremiah Washington, the renowned founder and CEO of Transnational Airways, one of the fastest-growing airlines in the country. Pamela looked as though she might faint. "Mr. Washington, I had no idea. I never would have." She trailed off, realizing there was no way to finish that sentence that wouldn't incriminate her further. "That's precisely the problem, isn't it, Ms. Brooks?" Jeremiah said, his voice carrying throughout the now silent cabin. "The fact that you would treat any child differently based on who their parents might be is exactly why we're in this situation." He turned to Marcus. "Mr. Reed, correct? Please escort Ms. Brooks to the rear galley and have her remain there for the duration of this flight." Contact the head of cabin services and inform them that Ms. Brooks is suspended pending a full investigation. Marcus nodded. Yes, sir. He gestured for Pamela to follow him, which she did without protest, her shoulders slumped in defeat. As they disappeared behind the curtain, the captain's voice came over the intercom. This is Captain Reynolds. I've been informed of an incident in first class. Is there a medical emergency requiring immediate landing? Jeremiah picked up the cabin phone. Captain, this is Jeremiah Washington. A pause. Yes, that Jeremiah Washington. My son has been injured by a crew member, but the situation is under control. I don't believe an emergency landing is necessary at this point, but I'd like to speak with you about our options. While Jeremiah spoke with the captain, Gabriella finished documenting Isaiah's injury and helped Marcus apply bandages to the puncture wounds. Why didn't you tell me you were flying with us today? She asked Jeremiah when he returned. I was going to surprise you both in Los Angeles, he explained. I've been traveling incognito, evaluating our in-flight service. It's something I do quarterly, book a ticket under my legal name but without the CEO title, sit in the back, observe how our staff treats regular passengers. He knelt beside Isaiah's seat. I'm so sorry this happened, son. How's your leg feeling? It hurts, Isaiah admitted. But I'm okay. I don't want to miss my presentation in Los Angeles. Jeremiah smiled proudly. You won't miss it. I promise. The three of them formed a tight family unit in that moment, though the complexity of their relationship was evident to the observing passengers. Gabriella and Jeremiah exchanged looks that spoke volumes, former spouses who had found a way to co-parent effectively despite their separation. Ladies and gentlemen, came the captain's voice again. This is Captain Reynolds. After consulting with our operations team and Mr. Washington, we've decided to continue to Los Angeles as scheduled. However, we will be making a brief stop in Phoenix to allow medical personnel to properly examine our injured passenger and for the appropriate authorities to be notified. We apologize for any inconvenience this may cause to your travel plans. A flight attendant from economy class was brought forward to assist with first-class service in Pamela's absence. The cabin gradually returned to a semblance of normalcy, though hushed conversations about what had transpired continued throughout. Jeremiah moved his belongings to sit with Gabriella and Isaiah. As they sat together, he explained his presence on the flight in more detail. I try to fly as a regular passenger at least once a quarter on different routes, he told them. No special treatment, no announcement, just observing our service quality firsthand. I was going to surprise you both at the gate in LA. How long were you going to let it go on? Gabriella asked quietly. You saw how she was treating us from the beginning. Jeremiah's jaw tightened. I was documenting everything. Poor service is one thing, it can be addressed through training. But what happened crossed a line I never imagined one of our employees would cross. He looked at Isaiah. I'm sorry I didn't intervene sooner, son. Isaiah shook his head. It's not your fault, Dad. As they spoke, Jeremiah's phone buzzed incessantly with messages from the airline's executive team, who had already been alerted to the situation through internal channels. Social media was beginning to light up as passengers shared what they had witnessed. This is going to be all over the news by the time we land, Gabriella said, glancing at her own phone. Jeremiah nodded grimly. I've already contacted our board and legal team. This goes beyond a customer service issue, it's assault on a minor with potential hate crime implications. He turned to Isaiah, his expression softening again. I'm so proud of you for that science competition win. Your mom told me all about your renewable energy project. Isaiah managed a small smile, color returning to his face as he began explaining his project to his father. As he talked, his enthusiasm gradually returned, momentarily displacing the trauma of what had occurred. Watching them, Gabriella felt a complex mix of emotions. While she and Jeremiah had divorced 3 years ago due to the strains of his demanding career, they had worked hard to maintain a healthy co-parenting relationship. Seeing Jeremiah's genuine interest in Isaiah's achievement reminded her of the good qualities that had drawn her to him initially. The captain's voice interrupted their conversation. "We're beginning our descent into Phoenix. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." As the plane descended, Jeremiah looked out the window thoughtfully. "You know," he said quietly, "when I started this airline 15 years ago, I made a promise that it would be different, that everyone would be treated with dignity regardless of who they were or what they looked like." He shook his head. "Today has shown me how far we still have to go." Isaiah reached over and put his small hand on his father's arm. "Maybe this happened for a reason, Dad. Maybe now you can make it better for everyone." Jeremiah looked at his son with newfound respect and squeezed his hand. "When did you get so wise?" The plane touched down in Phoenix, where paramedics, police, and airline officials waited to address the situation that had unfolded at 30,000 feet. The bright Arizona sunlight streamed through the windows as Flight 2187 taxied to a remote stand at Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport. Rather than pulling up to a regular gate, the aircraft stopped on the tarmac where several vehicles waited: an ambulance, 2 police cars, and a black SUV with the Transnational Airways logo emblazoned on its side. Inside the cabin, Isaiah winced as he shifted in his seat. The initial shock had worn off, and the pain in his leg had intensified. "Does it hurt a lot?" Jeremiah asked, noticing his son's discomfort. "It's not too bad," Isaiah insisted, though the tightness around his eyes suggested otherwise. "You don't have to be brave for us," Gabriella said gently. "It's okay to say if it hurts." The seatbelt sign dinged off, and Captain Reynolds emerged from the cockpit, making his way directly to their row. A tall man with graying temples, he had the commanding presence typical of veteran pilots. "Mr. Washington," he said, extending his hand to Jeremiah. "I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." "As do I, Captain," Jeremiah replied, standing to shake his hand. Captain Reynolds turned to Isaiah. "Young man, I understand you've been injured. The paramedics are waiting outside to take care of you." "Thank you, sir," Isaiah responded politely, his inherent good manners showing through despite everything. "What's going to happen now?" Gabriella asked. "Phoenix police will board first to take statements and secure Ms. Brooks," the captain explained. "Then the paramedics will come aboard to examine Isaiah. After that, you'll have a decision to make." Jeremiah raised an eyebrow. "What decision is that?" "Whether to continue to Los Angeles after Isaiah receives medical attention, or to remain in Phoenix overnight," Captain Reynolds said. "We can arrange accommodations either way. Obviously, Ms. Brooks will not be continuing to Los Angeles regardless of your decision." Jeremiah looked at Gabriella and Isaiah. "What do you think?" Before they could respond, the forward door opened, and 2 police officers boarded the plane. They spoke briefly with the captain before approaching the Washington family. "I'm Officer Ramirez, and this is Officer Chen," the female officer introduced herself. "We understand there's been an assault on a minor." Gabriella nodded, explaining what had transpired while showing the officers the photos she had taken of Isaiah's injury and the bloodied fork. Other passengers volunteered as witnesses, recounting Pamela's behavior throughout the flight leading up to the stabbing. After taking preliminary statements, the officers moved to the rear galley where Pamela had been sequestered. Minutes later, they escorted her off the plane, her hands cuffed behind her back, her face a mask of shock and humiliation. Once Pamela was removed, the paramedics boarded and examined Isaiah's leg. "The puncture wounds aren't deep enough to require stitches," the lead paramedic explained after cleaning the wounds again. "But they should be properly dressed, and he should receive a tetanus booster if he hasn't had one recently." "He's current on his vaccinations," Gabriella confirmed. "Still, we'd recommend having him checked at the hospital to rule out any infection risk," the paramedic advised. "Forked tines can harbor bacteria." As the paramedics worked, Jeremiah stepped away to make some calls. When he returned, his face was grim. "The story's already breaking online," he informed Gabriella quietly. Someone posted a video of the aftermath. Hashtag flying while black is trending. Gabriella sighed. That was fast. Our PR team is in crisis mode, Jeremiah continued. The board wants an emergency meeting tonight. But my priority is Isaiah and his well-being. He hesitated. And his science presentation. When is that scheduled? Day after tomorrow, Gabriella replied. That's why I wanted to get there early, give him time to settle in and prepare. Jeremiah nodded thoughtfully, then turned to Isaiah. Son, this is your decision. We can stay in Phoenix overnight for further medical treatment, or we can continue to Los Angeles after you're cleared by the paramedics here. What would you prefer? Isaiah didn't hesitate. I want to go to Los Angeles, Dad. I've been practicing my presentation for weeks. I don't want to miss it because of her. Jeremiah smiled proudly. That's my boy. The paramedics finished bandaging Isaiah's leg and provided care instructions for Gabriella. Keep the wounds clean, watch for signs of infection, and follow up with a doctor in Los Angeles within 48 hours, they advised. Meanwhile, the remaining passengers were growing restless. Some expressed concern about further delays, while others were supportive of the Washington family in whatever decision they made. Captain Reynolds approached again. Mr. Washington, we need to make a decision soon. The crew is approaching duty time limitations. Jeremiah nodded. We'll continue to Los Angeles, Captain. But I'd like to address the passengers first, if that's all right. With the captain's permission, Jeremiah stood at the front of the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, first let me apologize for the delay in your journey today. What happened on this flight is unacceptable and does not reflect the values of Transnational Airways, the company I founded and have led for 15 years. He paused, making eye contact with several passengers. As both CEO and as a father, I take full responsibility for the actions of our employee. I want to assure you that this incident will lead to immediate and sweeping changes in our hiring, training, and oversight procedures. Many passengers nodded approvingly, some even applauding. My son has decided he wants to continue to Los Angeles to fulfill his commitment to present his award-winning science project, Jeremiah continued. We'll be departing shortly, and as a token of appreciation for your patience, all passengers on this flight will receive vouchers for future travel. As Jeremiah returned to his seat, Marcus approached him. Sir, with Pamela gone, we're short-staffed for the remainder of the flight. You've done an exemplary job under difficult circumstances, Mr. Reed, Jeremiah told him. I'm promoting you effective immediately to lead flight attendant for the remainder of this journey. When we return to headquarters, I want you to head up our new passenger dignity initiative. Marcus's eyes widened. Sir. We need people like you who recognize when something is wrong and try to correct it, even when it's difficult, Jeremiah explained. Your actions today showed character and integrity. As preparations for departure resumed, Gabriella leaned over to Jeremiah. A new initiative already? The outline's been in my head for the past hour, he admitted. This incident has made me realize how much work we still have to do. Isaiah, who had been listening, perked up. Like my science project, Dad. I identified a problem, researched solutions, and created a prototype for change. Jeremiah smiled, ruffling his son's hair. Exactly like that, son. Sometimes it takes a crisis to spark the most important innovations. As the engine spooled up for departure, the Washington family settled in for the remainder of their journey to Los Angeles, unified by adversity, but determined not to let it define their experience or Isaiah's moment of academic triumph. As Flight 2187 made its final approach into Los Angeles International Airport, the setting sun cast a golden glow across the Pacific Ocean visible from the right side of the aircraft. The beauty of the scene contrasted sharply with the tension that still lingered in the cabin after the events of the day. Isaiah Washington gazed out the window, his bandaged leg propped carefully on a pillow that Marcus had provided. The pain had subsided to a dull throb thanks to the children's ibuprofen his mother had in her purse. His mind wasn't on his injury, however, but on what awaited them at the gate. "Will there be reporters?" he asked his father quietly. Jeremiah nodded, not wanting to sugarcoat the situation. "Probably. The story has spread quickly on social media. Our communications team has confirmed that several news outlets are waiting at the airport." "I've never been on TV before," Isaiah said, his voice small. Gabriella squeezed his hand. "You don't have to speak to anyone if you don't want to, sweetheart. We can protect your privacy." Isaiah considered this, then straightened his shoulders. "No, I want to speak. If people are going to talk about what happened to me anyway, I'd rather tell my own story." Jeremiah and Gabriella exchanged proud glances over their son's head. Despite their divorce, they had always been united in their admiration for Isaiah's resilience and maturity. The landing gear deployed with a mechanical rumble, and Captain Reynolds's voice came over the intercom. "Flight attendants, prepare for landing." Marcus, who had stepped admirably into his unexpected promotion as lead flight attendant, moved efficiently through the cabin ensuring compliance with landing procedures. The incident had bonded him with the Washington family, and he stopped briefly at their row. "Police and paramedics will board first when we arrive," he informed them quietly. "They'll want to take an official statement and check Isaiah's injuries again." "Thank you, Marcus," Jeremiah said. "For everything today." Marcus nodded. "Just doing my job, sir." "No," Jeremiah corrected him. "You went far beyond your job description today. You stood up when it would have been easier to look away." As the plane touched down on the runway, Jeremiah's phone vibrated with an incoming call. He glanced at the screen and grimaced. "The board again?" Gabriella guessed. "Yes," Jeremiah confirmed. "This is the third time they've tried to reach me during this flight. They're concerned about potential liability and damage to the company's reputation." "What will you tell them?" she asked. "The truth," Jeremiah said firmly. "That we have a serious problem that goes beyond one employee's actions, and that addressing it is not just a legal obligation but a moral one." The aircraft taxied to the gate, and as predicted, they could see the flashing lights of police vehicles through the windows. When the seatbelt sign finally dinged off, Captain Reynolds made one last announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived at Los Angeles International Airport. Local authorities will be boarding the aircraft momentarily. We ask that you remain seated until they have completed their initial procedures. On behalf of Transnational Airways, I sincerely apologize for the unfortunate events during our flight today." True to the captain's word, as soon as the door opened, 2 police officers and a paramedic boarded the plane. They approached the Washington family, and the paramedic immediately began a follow-up assessment of Isaiah's leg. "The wounds look clean," he confirmed. "But I'd still recommend a follow-up with a doctor tomorrow." While the paramedic worked, the police officers took formal statements from Isaiah, Gabriella, and Jeremiah, as well as several passenger witnesses. They explained that Pamela Brooks was already in custody in Phoenix, charged with assault on a minor with potential hate crime enhancements pending investigation. "Will we need to return to Phoenix for a trial?" Gabriella asked, concerned about the implications for Isaiah's schooling. "It's too early to say," the officer replied. "But given the circumstances and the evidence, including multiple witness statements and video recordings, there's a strong possibility the defendant will accept a plea arrangement." After nearly 45 minutes, the authorities finally cleared the passengers to deplane. Jeremiah spoke briefly with the flight crew, thanking them for their professionalism under difficult circumstances, then rejoined his family. "Ready?" he asked them. Isaiah nodded bravely. Gabriella adjusted his collar and smoothed his hair, her maternal instincts on high alert. "Remember," she told him, "you don't have to answer any questions you don't want to." As they stepped into the jet bridge, Jeremiah's phone buzzed again with messages. He glanced at it, then showed the screen to Gabriella. "The story has gone national," he said grimly. The headline from a major news outlet read, "Breaking, Transnational Airways flight attendant arrested for stabbing black child in first class, CEO's son. Accompanying the article was a passenger's blurry photo of Isaiah being treated by paramedics in Phoenix, with Jeremiah and Gabriella beside him. Their faces were clearly recognizable. "So much for privacy," Gabriella murmured. At the end of the jet bridge, airport police had formed a protective corridor to shield them from the gathered media. Camera flashes erupted as they emerged, and reporters called out questions. "Mr. Washington, will you be filing a lawsuit against your own company?" "Isaiah, how badly were you hurt?" "Ms. Washington, do you believe this was racially motivated?" Jeremiah placed a protective hand on Isaiah's shoulder as they walked briskly through the gauntlet, following the police escort to a private room near the gate area. Inside, a Transnational Airways executive crisis team awaited them, along with the airline's chief legal counsel. "Jeremiah," the legal counsel began without preamble, "the board is convening an emergency session in 30 minutes. They're expecting you to call in." "They can wait," Jeremiah replied firmly. "My son needs medical attention and rest." The crisis management director stepped forward. "Sir, with respect, this situation is escalating by the minute. #FlyingWhileBlack is the top trending topic nationwide. Civil rights organizations are already issuing statements. The company's stock price dropped 7% in after-hours trading when the news broke." Jeremiah's jaw tightened. "And you think that's my priority right now, Richard? Stock prices?" "Of course not, sir," the director backpedaled quickly. "But our response in the next few hours will be crucial." Gabriella, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "Isaiah needs to rest. He has his presentation tomorrow." "Day after tomorrow," Isaiah corrected her. "And I'm okay, Mom." "Really?" He turned to his father. "Dad, you should talk to the board. This is important." "I understand." Jeremiah knelt to Isaiah's eye level. "Nothing is more important than you, son." Isaiah smiled. "I know. But you can help make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. That's important too." Once again, the adults in the room were struck by the child's wisdom and compassion, even after everything he had endured. Jeremiah stood and addressed his crisis team. "Arrange for a doctor to examine Isaiah at our hotel. Prepare a statement acknowledging what happened and announcing immediate suspension of any employee with past discrimination complaints pending investigation. And set up the board call for 1 hour from now, not 30 minutes. My family comes first." As the team scrambled to fulfill these directives, Jeremiah turned back to Gabriella and Isaiah. "Let's get you both to the hotel. Doctor first, then room service, anything Isaiah wants." "Ice cream sundae?" Isaiah asked hopefully. Jeremiah smiled. "The biggest one they have." As they prepared to leave the airport through a private exit, Jeremiah's phone rang again. This time, the caller ID displayed White House. Gabriella's eyes widened. "The White House? Already?" Jeremiah looked as surprised as she was. Apparently, this story has reached the highest levels. He answered the call, listening intently for several minutes before responding, "Yes, Mr. President. I understand. Thank you for your concern. I'll keep you updated." When he hung up, both Gabriella and Isaiah were staring at him expectantly. The president wanted to express his personal concern for Isaiah's well-being, Jeremiah explained, still seeming somewhat stunned by the call. "And to discuss how this incident reflects broader issues of racial discrimination in transportation." "The president knows my name?" Isaiah whispered, momentarily forgetting his pain. "He does," Jeremiah confirmed. "And he said to tell you he's looking forward to seeing your renewable energy project someday." As they finally left the airport, escorted by security to a waiting SUV, the gravity of how their personal trauma had transformed into a national conversation about race and accountability began to sink in. What had started as a family trip to celebrate Isaiah's academic achievement had become something much larger, a potential catalyst for meaningful change. 3 days later, the ballroom of the Beverly Wilshire Hotel buzzed with anticipation as participants in the Youth Innovation Summit prepared to present their projects. Despite the media firestorm surrounding him, Isaiah Washington had insisted on fulfilling his commitment to the science competition that had brought him to Los Angeles in the first place. Backstage, Gabriella adjusted her son's tie while Jeremiah reviewed Isaiah's presentation notes one last time. "Are you sure you're up for this?" Gabriella asked, noting the slight wince as Isaiah shifted his weight. The puncture wounds were healing well, but still caused discomfort when he stood for too long. "I'm sure, Mom," Isaiah replied with quiet determination. "I've been working on this project for months. I'm not going to let what happened stop me." The past 72 hours had been a whirlwind. After receiving medical treatment at their hotel, Isaiah had watched in astonishment as his story dominated national news cycles. Civil rights organizations had issued statements condemning the incident, social media campaigns had emerged overnight, and #FlyingWhileBlack had sparked a broader conversation about discrimination in air travel. Jeremiah had spent much of that time in crisis management mode, dividing his attention between supporting his son and addressing the scandal engulfing his company. The Transnational Airways Board had initially pushed for a measured response focused on characterizing Pamela Brooks as a bad apple whose actions didn't reflect company values. Jeremiah had rejected that approach outright. "This isn't about one employee," he had told them during their emergency session. "This is about a culture that allowed someone with Pamela Brooks' prejudices to not only remain employed for 20 years but to be promoted to senior positions." His investigation had uncovered multiple previous complaints against Pamela that had been dismissed or buried by middle management. The pattern was clear, revealing systemic failures in how discrimination complaints were handled throughout the company. Now, as Isaiah prepared to take the stage, Jeremiah received a text message from his chief legal counsel. He read it quickly, then turned to Gabriella. "They've accepted our terms," he said quietly, so Isaiah wouldn't hear. Gabriella raised an eyebrow. "All of them?" Jeremiah nodded. "Full prosecution with hate crime enhancements, but with the option for restorative justice if Isaiah ever wants that. And she's agreed to make a public statement acknowledging the racial motivation behind her actions." "Good," Gabriella said firmly. As an attorney herself, she had been instrumental in shaping the legal strategy, balancing accountability with the possibility of redemption. "Ladies and gentlemen," came the announcer's voice from the stage, "our next presenter is a young man whose renewable energy project earned top honors at the National Junior Science Competition. Please welcome Isaiah Washington." The audience erupted in applause, significantly more enthusiastic than for previous presenters. Isaiah took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage, limping slightly but walking with purpose. "That's our boy," Jeremiah whispered, a catch in his throat as he watched his son approach the podium. For the next 15 minutes, Isaiah delivered his presentation flawlessly, explaining his innovative approach to solar energy storage with the confidence and clarity of someone twice his age. He never once mentioned the incident on the plane, focusing entirely on his scientific research and its potential applications for communities with limited access to reliable power. When he finished, the audience gave him a standing ovation. Several major tech company representatives approached him afterward, expressing interest in developing his ideas further. As the event concluded, Isaiah rejoined his parents, his face flushed with excitement. "They want to fund further research on my project," he exclaimed. "And offer me a summer internship when I'm in high school." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Gabriella said, hugging him carefully to avoid jostling his injured leg. Jeremiah's phone buzzed with an incoming call. He checked the screen inside. "It's the office again. I need to take this." While Jeremiah stepped away, a woman approached Gabriella and Isaiah. She introduced herself as Dr. Chen, a representative from the Department of Transportation. "Isaiah, I was very impressed by your presentation," she said warmly. "But I'm actually here because of what happened on your flight." She handed Gabriella her card. "We're launching a comprehensive investigation into discrimination in air travel, and we'd like your input on developing new industry-wide standards." Gabriella looked at the card thoughtfully. I'd be happy to contribute. This is actually related to my legal background in civil rights. When Jeremiah returned, his expression was somber. That was Marcus Reed. He's been going through employee records as part of our internal investigation. It's worse than we thought, Gabriella. Dozens of discrimination complaints across multiple airports, all handled the same way, buried or dismissed. Systemic, Gabriella murmured. Yes, Jeremiah agreed. But we're fixing it. Starting now. He turned to Dr. Chen, whom Gabriella quickly introduced. Doctor, I believe Transnational Airways could serve as a test case for implementing new anti-discrimination protocols. We're already drafting a comprehensive overhaul of our hiring, training, and complaint procedures. Dr. Chen looked impressed. That's exactly the kind of industry leadership we're hoping to encourage. As they discussed potential collaboration, Isaiah wandered over to a window overlooking the Los Angeles skyline. The past few days had been overwhelming, from the trauma of the attack to the media attention to his science presentation. Yet somehow, he felt stronger for having gone through it. Later that evening, as they dined in their hotel suite, Isaiah asked the question that had been on his mind. What's going to happen to Ms. Brooks? Jeremiah and Gabriella exchanged glances before Jeremiah answered carefully. She'll face consequences for her actions, Isaiah. She's been charged with assault on a minor with hate crime enhancements. Will she go to jail? Isaiah asked. That's likely, Gabriella explained. But we've also requested that the court consider options for rehabilitation and education. Isaiah nodded thoughtfully. I don't want her to just be punished. I want her to learn why what she did was wrong. Jeremiah smiled sadly at his son's compassion. That's very mature of you, Isaiah. And it's something we're working on for the whole company, not just punishment, but education and growth. Is that why you're not firing everyone right away? Isaiah asked, showing his understanding of the news coverage. Exactly, Jeremiah confirmed. Some people deserve to be fired immediately, but others made mistakes because they weren't properly trained or because they were working in a system that didn't support doing the right thing. Those people deserve a chance to learn and improve. The conversation was interrupted by a breaking news alert on Jeremiah's phone. The headline read, Transnational Airways announces industry-leading diversity initiative following fork attack incident. They're still calling it that? Gabriella grimaced. Fork attack. It sounds so trivializing. The media needs catchy headlines, Jeremiah sighed. But what matters is that they're covering the substance of our response too. He scrolled through the article. They're reporting on the comprehensive plan, the new training programs, the external audit of all past discrimination complaints, the establishment of a passenger dignity department. And they mention that the plan was developed with input from civil rights organizations, Gabriella noted, reading over his shoulder. That's important. Isaiah yawned, the excitement and stress of the day finally catching up with him. Time for bed, young scientist, Gabriella said, noticing his fatigue. You've had quite a day. As she helped Isaiah get ready for bed, Jeremiah stepped onto the balcony of their suite, gazing out at the city lights. His company was facing its greatest crisis, but also its greatest opportunity for meaningful transformation. His son had been hurt, something he would never fully forgive himself for, but Isaiah's courage and wisdom throughout the ordeal had shown Jeremiah what true leadership looked like. When Gabriella joined him on the balcony, they stood in comfortable silence for a moment before she spoke. He's asleep, she said. The doctor said rest is the best thing for him now. Jeremiah nodded. Gabriella, I've been thinking. This whole situation has made me reevaluate a lot of things. Like what? She asked, though her expression suggested she already knew. Like the fact that I've been so focused on building this airline that I missed too many moments with you and Isaiah. He turned to face her directly. The divorce was my fault. I know that now. Gabriella's expression softened. It took both of us, Jeremiah. We both made mistakes. Maybe, he conceded. But seeing you with him these past few days, you're an amazing mother. And watching how you've handled this crisis with such strength and grace. He trailed off. I've missed you both more than I realized. Gabriella didn't respond immediately, but she didn't pull away when Jeremiah cautiously took her hand. I'm not asking for anything, he clarified quickly. I just wanted you to know that. Whatever happens next with the company, with the legal case, Isaiah comes first from now on. Always. She squeezed his hand. That's a good place to start. Inside the suite, Isaiah slept peacefully, his science project materials neatly organized for transport home, his leg propped on a pillow as the doctor had instructed. On the nightstand beside him lay a small silver fork, the one from the plane, now sealed in an evidence bag, a sobering reminder of how a moment of hate had catalyzed a movement for change. 1 year later, a much taller Isaiah Washington stood confidently at the podium in Transnational Airways' newly renovated headquarters in Atlanta. The banner behind him read, Wings STEM Academy, opening doors to the sky. A diverse crowd of executives, educators, journalists, and 50 excited middle school students from underserved communities filled the auditorium. When I was 11 years old, Isaiah began, his voice steady and clear, I experienced something on an airplane that could have defined my life in a very negative way. Instead, standing here today, I can see how that painful moment became the catalyst for positive change, not just for me or my family, but for thousands of people. At the back of the auditorium, Gabriella and Jeremiah Washington watched their son with identical expressions of pride. They stood close together, Jeremiah's arm comfortably around Gabriella's waist, their wedding rings, both new, both selected together 6 months earlier when they remarried in a small, private ceremony, catching the light. Isaiah continued, the Wings STEM Academy is something I dreamed up while recovering from my injury. I realized that if I could turn my love of science into an award-winning project, other kids could do amazing things too, if they just had the resources and opportunity. The academy was Isaiah's brainchild, but it had been brought to life through the Washington Family Foundation, funded by a substantial portion of Jeremiah's personal fortune. The program would provide STEM education, mentorship, and aviation exposure to underprivileged children across the country. Each of you, Isaiah addressed the inaugural class of students, will receive full support through high school, guaranteed internships at technology and aviation companies, and college scholarships. All we ask in return is that you dream big and work hard. The students, wearing navy blue blazers with silver wings pins, applauded enthusiastically. Many of them came from circumstances similar to the ones Isaiah might have experienced had his parents not been successful professionals. After Isaiah concluded his speech, Marcus Reed, now Transnational's Vice President of Passenger Experience and Inclusion, took the stage to provide an update on the airline's transformation. In the past year, Marcus reported, we've completely overhauled our hiring and training practices. Every employee, from baggage handlers to pilots, undergoes comprehensive anti-bias training. We've established clear protocols for reporting and addressing discrimination, resulting in a 78% increase in employee satisfaction and a 65% decrease in passenger complaints. He continued, presenting slides that showed the dramatic improvements in diversity among the airline staff at all levels. Transnational is now the industry leader in inclusive hiring practices, with the most diverse executive team among major carriers. The journalists present took notes furiously. What had begun as a scandal had evolved into a case study in corporate transformation, with Transnational Airways now regularly cited in business schools as an example of how to turn crisis into opportunity. When the formal presentations concluded, the event transitioned to a reception. As guests mingled, a woman approached Isaiah, waiting patiently until he finished speaking with one of the STEM Academy students. Isaiah turned, and his eyes widened slightly in recognition. Pamela Brooks looked markedly different from their last encounter. The haughty demeanor was gone, replaced by a humility that showed in her posture and expression. She had aged visibly, stress having etched new lines around her eyes. "Hello, Isaiah," she said quietly. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. This meeting wasn't spontaneous. After serving 8 months in a minimum security facility and undergoing intensive therapy and anti-racism education as part of her sentence, Pamela had requested the opportunity to apologize to Isaiah in person through a restorative justice program. After much consideration and family discussion, Isaiah had agreed. "Let's sit down," he suggested, gesturing to a quiet corner of the reception hall. As they sat, Gabriella and Jeremiah watched from a distance, ready to intervene if Isaiah showed any sign of distress, but respecting his wish to handle this conversation himself. "I want to thank you," Pamela began, her voice thick with emotion, "for requesting restorative justice options in my case. The rehabilitation program changed my life in ways that simple punishment never could have." She took a deep breath. "I've spent this past year confronting the prejudices I didn't even realize I carried, beliefs that had been instilled in me since childhood but that I never examined critically." Isaiah listened attentively, his expression serious beyond his years. "What I did to you was inexcusable," Pamela continued. "There's no justification for it. But I want you to know that through therapy and education, I've come to understand the deep harm caused by racism, both overt and subtle. I speak now to airline employees about my experience and what I've learned. Do you think they listen?" Isaiah asked, genuinely curious. Pamela nodded. "They do. When someone who's walked the wrong path speaks about the consequences, not just legal, but spiritual and moral, it has impact. Every week, I receive messages from industry professionals who say my story made them examine their own behaviors and biases." There was an authenticity to her words that resonated with Isaiah. The transformation seemed genuine, not performed to reduce her sentence or rehabilitate her image, but born of genuine introspection and growth. "I forgive you," Isaiah said simply. "Not just for me, but for you. Holding on to anger wouldn't help either of us move forward." Tears welled in Pamela's eyes. "Your compassion is remarkable, especially after what I did." She hesitated. "May I ask you something? That scar on your leg?" Isaiah nodded, understanding the unfinished question. "It's still there. Not very noticeable anymore." He rolled up his pant leg slightly, revealing a small, star-shaped scar where the forked tines had penetrated his skin. "My dad wanted to pay for cosmetic procedures to remove it completely, but I decided to keep it." "Why?" Pamela asked, surprised. As a reminder, Isaiah explained. "Not of the pain or fear, but of how a single moment can change everything, sometimes for the better, in unexpected ways. If that hadn't happened, we wouldn't be sitting here today. The STEM Academy might not exist. All those new airline policies might never have been created." Their conversation concluded with a quiet understanding between them. No dramatic reconciliation, no Hollywood ending, just two human beings acknowledging a painful shared history and the growth that had come from it. As Isaiah rejoined his parents, Gabriella squeezed his shoulder. "You okay?" "I'm good, Mom," he assured her. It was the right thing to do. Across the room, Marcus was introducing the STEM students to the airline's newest pilot recruits, a diverse group that included several graduates from historically black colleges and universities. "Your idea for the pilot mentorship program was brilliant," Jeremiah told Isaiah. "These kids are going to have opportunities we couldn't have imagined a generation ago." The family moved through the reception, stopping frequently as people congratulated them not only on the STEM Academy launch but also on their recent family reunification. The media had covered their remarriage with almost as much interest as they had the original incident, framing it as a phoenix-like story of family resilience. As the event wound down, Isaiah, Gabriella, and Jeremiah slipped away from the crowd, making their way to the rooftop helipad where the company helicopter waited to take them to the airport. "Ready for your first international science competition?" Jeremiah asked Isaiah as they boarded. Isaiah nodded excitedly. "I can't believe we're really going to Tokyo. Your renewable energy project deserves to be seen on the global stage," Gabriella said, settling into her seat. As the helicopter lifted off, they could see Transnational's flagship aircraft below, newly painted with the company's redesigned logo, silver wings embracing a globe, symbolizing the airline's commitment to bringing people together across cultures and backgrounds. Inside the terminal, a new crew trained by Marcus Reed prepared to welcome passengers aboard, including a class of elementary school children from a Title I school experiencing their first flight through the Wings program's Aviation Exposure Initiative. "Look," Isaiah said, pointing as they passed over the aircraft. "There's our plane." "Our plane," Jeremiah repeated thoughtfully. "You know, I built this airline thinking success meant bigger profits and more routes. I never realized until last year that true success is measured by the lives you touch and the positive changes you create." Gabriella took his hand, intertwining her fingers with his. "It took all of us learning some hard lessons to get here." As the helicopter banked toward the airport where their international flight awaited, Isaiah pressed his forehead against the window, watching his father's airline, now truly a family legacy, grow smaller below them. On his leg, beneath his pants, the small fork-shaped scar had faded but remained, a permanent reminder of how pain could transform into purpose, and how a moment of darkness had ultimately brought more light into the world than anyone could have imagined. Isaiah's story teaches us that racial discrimination can appear anywhere, even in places of service where everyone deserves equal treatment. The incident on Flight 2187 reveals how bias operates both individually through Pamela's actions and systemically through an airline that buried previous complaints. True change requires courage at multiple levels: Isaiah's resilience in continuing his journey despite trauma, Marcus's bravery in standing against workplace discrimination, and Jeremiah's commitment to transforming his entire company rather than treating it as an isolated incident. The most powerful lesson comes from Isaiah himself, who chose to keep his scar as a reminder that pain can transform into purpose. By creating the Wings STEM Academy and supporting rehabilitation rather than mere punishment, the Washington family demonstrated how justice can be both firm and compassionate. Their story reminds us that confronting discrimination isn't just about calling out wrongdoing, it's about creating pathways for genuine transformation, both personal and institutional. What would you do if you witnessed discrimination while traveling? Would you speak up like Marcus did, or would fear of consequences keep you silent? Have you ever been in a situation where someone's prejudice affected you or someone you care about? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story touched you, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories about overcoming adversity. Your support helps us continue sharing these important narratives that can change hearts and minds. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message of resilience and transformation. Thank you for watching, and remember, when we stand up against discrimination together, we create a world where everyone can fly high without fear of being brought down by prejudice.